Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Outside Insider. It's been a minute, isn't it? It's been a little while since we've got together and spoken about the Eagles. And I apologise for that. I apologise for being away. I promise we'll get right back into where we left off with the prospect film room starting from Wednesday. It's just been one thing after another in terms of like the last month for me. Like my girlfriend left to go to Australia for a couple of weeks, for a month. And then a week before that, she had to have a pacemaker change and like got rushed to hospital to do it overnight. So I had to stay there for a couple of days. Got back and then I had to do my mum's Christmas present. Took her to see Bruce Springsteen, which was a million miles away. And then I got gout in my foot and I was like in bed for like a week straight pretty much. So it's just been one of those things where I couldn't find a rhythm to essentially start streaming reliably again. And in that time, a lot has changed with the Philadelphia Eagles. We've had mandatory minicamp. We've had some rumors circulating, one of which you'll have noticed on the thumbnail involving one Jaire Alexander. And I want to talk a little bit about that in today's just kind of reintroduction show, just getting us back up to speed, talking about the Eagles and getting into the thick of it. But with minicamp in the books, I'm sure there's plenty for us to digest. There's a couple of players that have really stood out. Jaire Hunt has certainly been one of them, but we'll get to all of that in a little bit. I wanted to start this video with the rumor mill spinning around one Jaire Alexander, the former Packers corner, the all-pro corner, two-time released from Green Bay. Kind of surprising to some, unsurprising to others. His contract was very hefty and he's only played 14 games across the last two seasons. There was an incident where he was fined or suspended for some conduct deemed detrimental to the team a couple of years ago. And then from there, it has just been a slog of injuries. So the question is that I wanted to pose to you guys, should the Eagles be interested in bringing Jaire Alexander into Philadelphia? And I don't think that's as black and white as some people say. For me, I see it like this, okay? The team lost Darius Slay. I say lost. They let him go, okay? Is it a loss? Depends who you ask. Great corner. Brilliant signing at the time. They got a good few years out of him. He won a Super Bowl. Did all you could ask for as a veteran on the team, despite some particularly, I guess, debatable antics on social media, which didn't exactly help his standing among the fan base. But overall, we can look back at that era as a good one. You know, it was good to have him on the team. He got him to a Super Bowl, was a great corner for the first couple of years. And did he lose a step in 2024? Also difficult to say, but I don't think he was at his very peak. So letting him go, very much the right call. Now, what they have behind Darius Slay in the corners that are willing to step up, you've got Keely Ringo, who is someone that I've been extremely high on for pretty much since he was drafted, to be honest with you. I think he's got everything you could want in a developmental cornerback. He's long, he's twitchy, he's rangy, he fights hard around the catch point, he hits hard. I think the tackling angles are a little bit hit and miss sometimes, but in the preseason of years past, so from 2023 to 2024, there was certainly a jump in the production that we saw from him. And that is enticing enough for me, if I'm a coach, to say, well, let's see what he can do this year. So if he's not ready, the team went out and got Adoree Jackson, a corner that I was high on coming out of college. Former USC guy, has sustained an NFL career, which, if we're honest, is difficult to do for a defensive back. How many of these second, third, fourth round picks come out and then within 5-6 years, they're just no longer in the league or they're fighting for depth roles? Like, it happens a lot. So you bring in someone that has experience in the division, that has experience as a starter at the NFL level on the boundary, is an insurance policy in case Keely Ringo can't quite get up to speed. Does that mean, though, you go out and acquire Jaire Alexander? To me, a lot of people here are going to say no because it's expensive, he's hurt, he can't stay healthy, his best is behind him, yada, yada, yada. I think because of those reasons and because of what I just said, the Eagles, out of all the NFL teams that could be sniffing around for his services, might be the best placed of any of them to give him a home. And the reason is simple. There would be no immediate pressure on Alexander to start right away. There will be none whatsoever. Because you've got Ringo, because you've got Adoree Jackson, you don't need him to come in and start competing for starting reps and start outside week one, especially if he's coming off an injury. You know, he's coming off of what I believe was like a torn patella tendon. It's a tough injury to come back from. realistically, is he going to be ready for week 1? You don't know. Now, the current asking price for him is $16 million for 1 year, according to various NFL sources that over the last week, right? That's too much. If you're Howie Roseman, though, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and the market gets quieter and quieter, and teams aren't lining up at the door to bring him in, and they're not bringing him in for workouts and that kind of thing. If you can get a corner as good as Jaire Alexander for, let's say, 8 to 9 million, you've just saved a gargantuan amount of money by trading Bryce Huff. Okay, Huff has gone to the 49ers. We haven't touched on that yet as well. We can touch on that in just... There's a lot to catch up on. We'll touch on Bryce Huff shortly. But Bryce Huff has gone. That cap hit has been circumvented. He's renegotiated his deal to be traded to San Francisco. They'll take on the bulk of the cap hit. The Eagles already had ample cap space. They now have a little bit more. Now, realistically, they can't go spending all of that on a 1-year rental for a corner that may or may not start. If this was a team that needed a CB1, Jaire Alexander isn't the guy because of those concerns, because of the injury setbacks, because of the contract value. However, if that comes down, if the price continues to drop, even if it is 11 to 12 million, and Alexander goes, you know what, I want to win a Super Bowl. I feel wronged by the Packers. There was clearly some discontent there between him and the team. I want to go somewhere new. If you can just let him ride out training camp, ride out OTAs, ride out preseason, not getting him into any kind of risky situation where his neck's going to be on the line, where he's going to end up potentially injured or re-aggravating an injury, not many teams have that luxury. The Eagles do, because they've already got a basser at CB2. Realistically, if you end up signing him and you put him in CB1 straight away, it nullifies the signing of Adoree Jackson. It's detrimental to Kelee Ringo. That would suck because I think he's worked hard for that opportunity and he's certainly shown enough promise to develop into that player. But if you bring him in as someone that is like, look, this is a risk versus reward scenario. No team in the NFL really has the luxury to bring in a Pro Bowl corner at that price. Let's say, for instance, 11 to 12 mil once the market dies down a little bit, to just wait and see if he gets healthy for 1 year. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And you're not tied to him long term and you can get yourself, that cap space back later for the next offseason. But he's going to want a big deal. He knows he's probably not in a position to get that. This is the trademark prove-it contract signing for Howie Roseman. You look at Mekhi Becton, it's a different situation, but something very similar. Former first-round pick. Didn't quite work out with the Jets. Had some injury concerns. Play was declining. Comes to Philadelphia on a very cheap deal. Ends up being his starting left guard. Ends up taking him arguably to a Super Bowl. Or right guard, so ends up taking him to a Super Bowl. That's the kind of player that Howie targets now. The depth of the roster is clear. You've got players that can really begin to grow. And right now, there is no, outside of Jackson, veteran cornerback on that roster to help those younger guys. And I'm not the biggest Darius Slay fan. I will go out, I've said it, near enough all of last season. He was not my favorite guy on the roster. And purely because of the way that he carried himself on social media, I thought it was detrimental at the best of times. If you've got someone that is experienced, is played at a top level for the bulk of his career, can nurture and help those guys. Imagine the development of someone like Quinyon Mitchell if he could learn from Jaire Alexander. Even if Alexander doesn't practice, even if he never plays a snap, just having him in the locker room to bounce ideas off, to learn from in terms of the technicals and the fundamentals and the coaching side of it. How valuable is that to a guy like Kelee Ringo? To a guy, I dare say Cooper DeJean. I dare say Max McWilliam, who, of course, he was drafted, I should say, this offseason. I think that is really intriguing. And again, if you're a team that needs a CB1, this is the desperation kind of move that the Raiders would make, that the Jets would make, that the Giants would make, that the Browns would make, where you just go out and you pay 16, 18 million on a failing corner that has injury concerns and you push him into CB1 and it's a little bit late in the offseason and he doesn't get up to speed and his career dwindles. But if you bring him into Philadelphia, where there's no pressure to start right away and he can help grow the younger corners on this roster, he can learn under Vic Fangio, he can get up to speed without needing to worry about, I'm expected to start, I have to be at my best. This is a make or break deal for me. I need to go out and secure a bag, but I'm not healthy. Therefore, I'll risk myself to do it. He can wait. The Eagles know what they're having him. He's under no pressure. And if you start Ringo that offseason, if you start Ringo in week 1 and week 2 and week 3 and week 4, and it's not quite working and he's giving up deep catches and he's struggling in man coverage, and you've just got this ace in the back pocket of, when he's ready, one of the best corners in the league on his day. And we got him at 11, 12 mil, weeks after his asking price settled. I think that is a very, very good move that Howie Roseman would be behooved to make. So that's where I am on the Jaire Alexander situation. I think it would be a fantastic signing if it's done the right way. If they signed him, for instance, and then in week 1 of training camp, all the reports that he's getting reps with the starters and he's in with the ones and he's playing constantly, I would be a bit more concerned. If it's they sign him and he's walking around, in sweatpants around the Novacare complex and he's seen with the younger guys and he's trying to give them information and trying to coach them up, that for me is the more valuable play. And you just let him get back to full health. This isn't someone that needs training camp, not someone that needs OTAs. Literally one of the best corners in the league when healthy. So let him get healthy, let the value drop, bring him in, and it is the same kind of trademark signing that has helped push this roster over the edge again and again and again. There we go. That's my rant on Jaire. We'll get to some of your comments. I know you guys are back in YouTube. It's been great, seeing you all again. I apologize once more for the absence. But I come back now. Look, a couple of years ago, I just that would be it for like 2 years and I'd just lose it. But it's just been one of those month periods where it's been one thing after another. And I couldn't find, I knew I could do, for instance, like a Wednesday, but then I'd be away on the Friday, or I could do the Monday and then my foot thing happened. And I'd be like, well, now I'm knackered and my body clock's broken and I can't really push myself to do a stream. So it just got a bit difficult, but I promise you there's a lot of PSN content coming. We just had a meeting about a Sixers podcast, Flipping the Birds will be back tomorrow, hopefully. All good stuff. So we're not going anywhere, I promise with you, and I apologize once again for going MIA. It was never intentional. Birdbrain, nice to see you, my friend. Says it's a maybe for him. If they're not confident about Keely and Adore, Jay will be willing to sign an incentive-filled contract. I could see it. That's the kind of vibe I'm looking for. That's what I'm seeing with this. I think this could be a really beneficial move for the Eagles if they go about it the right way and they can get a guy on their roster again that can just help those younger players along the way without needing to be the guy. And a lot of teams are going to look at him as the guy because he's been the guy his entire career. Just let him go under the radar, let him work slowly, let him get back up to speed, and think of how many times the Eagles have signed a player in a similar spot. All right, not bar for bar. We're not saying coming off injuries and the 2 Pro Bowls, but Timmy Jernigan was another example. We already mentioned, just a few moments ago what they did with Mekhi Becton. This isn't new for the Eagles. They're happy to go out and get those guys a little bit more subtly when the price drops. They're not going to be the first bidder, the first knocker at the door. They like to play a bit hard to get. And frankly, I don't blame them. So I think that'd be a good idea. Duck Fee5 firm, I had the voice of an Englishman. And I'm happy you do. I'm honestly so happy to be back. It's been way too long. It's been way too long since you've spoken about the Birds and so much has happened. And it's just good to settle down and digest what has been a very chaotic month for the Eagles in terms of a few rumours of contract extensions. After what they did with Jurgens this offseason, are we going to be looking at the Jalen Carter deal next offseason? There's a few players. Reed Blankenship is certainly another one. And a few players that have stood out in OTAs as well for mandatory minicamp at least. They can go pound sand 17 million a year. If it's 1 mil, 8.5 and then 8 in incentives, then we can entertain it. And if he does well, it could be another comp pick. I like it. I think that'd be a fair way of doing it. I would not bring Alexander in for more than 3 to 5. Prove it, considering he might have to sit for a bit. Yeah, I think that's it. You've got to see it as, it's like a real life game of Crash, right? At some point, you're going to have to go, right, now's the time, or we're going to lose him. Because, what if he ended up signing with, not that they need him, but the Commanders or the Cowboys or the Giants? The potential for that is there. And the Cowboys would overpay. The Commanders would overpay. There are going to be teams that are going to be happy to shell out 16 million at this point in the proceedings because you're not expecting a player of that caliber to be available. But if it drops to 12 or 11 and more teams get interested, or 10 or 9 or 8, I don't know. There's a lot to go through there. But I think, they can't sign Carter until next offseason, just to touch on Duck's comment here. They can't do anything, I believe, until the fourth year of his contract. And then, by that point, Alexander, I assume, wouldn't be on the roster. This Prove It experiment would be up, and he's free to go and sign a 30 million deal for 2 years with the Ravens, and then Pootle out over there. I think that's potentially the route that would go. I know the Cowboys are muddy, but I was just saying, hypothetically, it was more for a fan perspective of if you saw him suit up for the Cowboys, would you be a bit more disgruntled if you saw him suit up? Especially the Commanders, or a team in the NFC where they could be dangerous if the right pieces fell into place. And if I'm honest, I've not done enough recent research to know who needs a CB1 and who doesn't, but I can guarantee that most teams in the NFL would benefit from having Jaire Alexander go and run some snaps for them in the thick of the regular season. So we'll see. But it's an intriguing scenario. I think one that, again, the Eagles will be wise to at least entertain, to sniff around, to see what they could get him for. They are defending Super Bowl champions. They've got this new built reputation of almost being, I hate to say it, very Steelers-esque, very buttoned up, very head down, work hard. It's all about leadership. It's all about focus and composure. And it's no longer Nigel Bradham umbrella incidents. It's no longer contract holdouts. It's none of that. It is just a full, smooth sailing ship with the right people at the head of it, steering it the right way. And if Jaire Alexander is willing to take a bit of a pay cut to join a franchise like that, I could definitely see that being, a possibility. But talking of other possibilities, obviously OTAs have been and gone, at least the mandatory minicamp section of it. And there's been a few whispers of players that have stood out. And one of them in particular brings me great joy to say. I don't know about you guys, but Jaire Hunt has been getting rave reviews through the early portion of the spring. Now, granted, it's spring, okay? We can't do this again. We do it every year where we hype up players in mini camps where they're not allowed to hit, the pads aren't on, and it's just drills and 7-on-7s or whatever. And you end up with you could pick any number of players from the last decade where you get high on them in the spring and it just doesn't quite peter out that way. But Jaire Hunt, I think, ended the season so strongly, given the way that he was just thrust into pretty much unprecedented waters. Not many people expected him as a third-round pick from a small school to be NFL ready by that point in his career and to make an impact in the Super Bowl, to make an impact in the playoffs, to almost make it better than when Bryce Huff was ever on the field. Given that, Brandon Graham obviously was down. It was Josh Sweat, Jaire Hunt, and Nolan Smith pretty much shouldering the load at the edge position. Did a great job. And the next step in that development is just more fine-tuning, it's more coaching, and I think you're starting to see the very, very early signs of a player that fit the Howie Roseman mold. And we said it when he was drafted. I remember doing the film room, around a year ago, where this is a player that is so, so freakishly athletic. Above average in nearly every athletic metric in terms of the short distance stuff and the agility and the explosiveness. And he's a perfect hybrid player. And you're now in a position where the Eagles must be pretty confident in him to get rid of Bryce Huff. I said, if I'm honest, the Bryce Huff trade didn't shock me, but I think that was Howie Roseman recognizing a mistake very, very early, which is something he's getting increasingly better at as his tenure with the Eagles continues. This is a GM that has gone from the days of paying Jason Peters until he's 49 years old to cutting loose ties before they begin to hinder the team. And we knew that Bryce Huff contract would begin to snowball. It wasn't going to take long. One more season. And with Jalen Carter to pay, with Nolan Smith to pay, with Jordan Davis to pay, that's not a contract you can have. Now, again, what they did was smart. The initial signing, I liked from a thesis standpoint, which is a player that was brilliant in a rotational role with the Jets. And if you can turn that into sustained production as a full-time edge rusher, you've got a gem at a fraction of a price, before that market value sets in. What happened was it didn't work out. Physically, just didn't happen. Like Bryce Huff struggled to pace himself, I think, deep into drives. He struggled to know when to turn it on, when to let off the gas a little bit, when to go all out. Whereas with the Jets, it was just all out constantly because you're going out there 18 plays into a drive against a beat-up offensive line in the third quarter. It's kind of easy to get a sack. You can't do that when it's the first play of the game and you're trying to set the edge and you're trying to contain the run. Like, he just doesn't have that in him. Then you had the coaching concerns. Then you had the injury. And it was very clear that this just wasn't going to be an experiment worth the price. Like, it was a good risk-reward gamble to get that first year cheap, to allow him to grow in that first season. It didn't pan out. And to instead of just double down every time you're wrong and to keep paying the player that isn't, bought in necessarily to what the Eagles are selling, then just cut him loose. Just get rid of him and find someone that will fit it. And that's a tough thing to do when it's a young player. You've just signed into a meaty contract. Everyone was confused about it at the time. And a lot of GM's downfall in the NFL is just, being unable to separate ego and pride from that logical conversation. Like, if Bryce Huff ain't working, get rid of him. You don't just continue to put him out on the field at the expense of players that would be doing better. And in a weird way, I think the injury was the best thing to happen to this Eagles defense, because had it not been for that injury, we wouldn't have had a Nolan Smith breakout. We wouldn't have had a Jaire Hunt breakout. And you wouldn't have been able to move on from Josh Sweat, who has become what he is, I think now. Like, Jaire Hunt is a middling, rotational to edge 2 player that can get you 6-7 sacks a season, that hustles well, but he's kind of at that ceiling and he's going to want more money. The Eagles can't really pay it. You lose Brandon Graham, you lose Bryce Huff, and without that injury, you are not confident in what you have with Jaire and what you have with Nolan, because they don't get the opportunities, right? I think that genuinely was just a very weird silver lining, and you never want to say injuries are a good thing, and that's not what I'm trying to, portray. But I think there were certainly silver linings in Bryce Huff missing so much time and it just falling down the way it did, because it gave the Eagles confidence in the young players they have. So Bryce Huff gets traded. The Eagles are able to shave a lot of that salary. They're able to recoup some of the potential draft capital. We still don't know the ins and outs yet, just because, they have to wait until everything's fully cleared. But the question now is then, do they go and get another edge rusher? And that, I think, is it's an interesting question, because I think it comes down to what they're going to do with linebackers more than anything. Like, you've got to remember now that the Eagles have gone from a 4-3 to a 3-4, and they have loaded up the ship with strong defensive tackle candidates. Like, we're not just talking Carter and Davis. You look at Robinson. Yes, you lost Milton Williams this offseason. I think Robinson's going to negate a lot of that. Maybe not year 1, certainly year 2 and 3. And you've got a couple of other players like Moro Ojomo that have proven that they can hang, that they can be a part of this rotation. So there'll be times where they'll be fielding 3 defensive tackles, and, the edges might be sat back. It could be a mix of linebackers. I don't think it's a coincidence that they spent a first-round pick on Jihad Campbell, someone that was just an absolute menace against the pass. Don't get me wrong, incredible in coverage, but the ability to sell that as well as come downhill, burst on blitzes, and make absolute chaos in the trenches, I think is just a beautiful thing. You've got Zach Bourne there as well. You've got someone like Smail Mondon, who's a project player. I'm not his biggest fan, but I certainly think he's got some upside as a pass rusher. You can just be given a little bit of free reign here and there. And then you've got Nakobe Dean, who we may not be seeing for a while. Like, the linebacker position now has so many options. Bourne is there long term, which I'm still elated about. Jihad Campbell's going to be your guy if you can get up to speed to almost take over that Mike role. And then it's up to them how they deploy. Like, it's also interesting, I think, that they've gone so DB heavy at the minute. Like, Cooper DeJean, interestingly, we haven't touched on this yet, and I'll say it with a smile because I suggested it on maybe the last stream I had, or certainly one of them, that DeJean would maybe move to safety this offseason, and people weren't happy about it. They think he should stay in the nickel, and then it takes one practice of OTAs, and all of a sudden it's might be moving top of the defensive backfield. So, British ball knowledge. All right. Anyway, as part of that, because you've got so many DBs, the Eagles have just got lighter and lighter to combat the amount of just speedy receivers that you've got. And on one hand, they reversed it offensively. You get a guy like Saquon that can take advantage of those lighter sets. But until the rest of the NFL catches up, you kind of have to go small ball. You have to go light. You have to run these like really agile defensive backs. And they bring in, obviously, Mac McWilliams this offseason. You've got a little bit of optionality with corners and a couple of safeties. Andrew Makuba was the most notable name to be drafted. So they've got a lot of DBs, they've got a lot of linebackers, and they've got some girth up front with defensive tackle, for lack of a better term. And I think that might offset the need to go out and get another edge rusher. So all of that essentially was just to try and paint a picture of the defense, and that there's not as much pressure on the edge position as there was this time last year, like where the time they signed Huff, where no one really knew what was going to happen with the edge position under Fangio. No one really knew if they would still be on the field as much, if it just would be the odd snap here and there. And now we've got a clearer picture, and you look at how they're being deployed. I don't think you need to go out and get another all-star edge rusher. If one pops up in a trade, I know like Hendrickson has been one of the names that has been linked to the Eagles over the past few weeks. If he comes out and he's available and it's cheap and it's a fair deal, then be my guest. I'm not going to say no to adding a premier edge rusher to this group, but I don't think there's urgent pressure. I would put, honestly, CB2 over the need for a premier edge rusher right now, which kind of reinforces my point of if Jaire is going cheap and he's available and you can do something with it, then why wouldn't you? So very interesting look for this defense next year, but it's exciting. There's a lot of good young players. A lot of them are going to be playing that little bit harder just because there's contract stipulations on the line. Blankenship, Carter, Davis, Dean, that's near enough, like a quarter of your defense in terms of starters already. The only exceptions are going to be really Quignon and Cooper, who are still in their second year now. So there's a lot for the Eagles to digest with this defense, and I think it's going to be very intriguing to see how Fangio just deploys them all, gets them all going, and see, especially in training camp, if there is a little bit of lack of a punch at that edge spot, because I don't think there will be. I think they're going to be set with what they have and the creativity that Fangio can use to get those boys rolling. So only time will tell, but I'm pretty confident that there's no need to go out and spend another 12, 13 million on an edge rusher. Like, it just isn't needed, I don't think, with the weaponry that you have at defensive tackle, at linebacker, at those hybrid edge spots. Like, you just don't need to go out and, sell the farm to go and get yourself that guy. Doug says that's why we have Bourne and Trott Jr. The linebackers are going to work a bit harder. Completely agree. I really, really agree. And, the ideal situation from here is that the NFL responds to Saquon Barkley's breakout, the generational best rushing season of all time, including the playoffs. I think that it hasn't done it as much yet, if I'm honest. I was expecting a lot more running back activity in free agency and with trades and the draft, and it just wasn't there, which is good for the Eagles because, the more they can kind of set the tone, the better. But I was expecting there to be a bit of pushback, a little bit more focus on finding these stockier backs, these downhill runners that not necessarily Derrick Henry 2.0 or Saquon 2.0, but just guys that can do a job, and just keep the ball in possession and run it downhill. And that I didn't really see too much of that. So if I'm honest, I figured that would happen. And therefore having Zach Bourne locked down, having a new Mike linebacker in Jihad, having Nakobe Dean play his ass off under a contract year when he gets healthy, having Jeremiah Trotter take that next step would be huge because you've really bulked up that linebacker position to offset a league-wide focus on rushing, which I don't think it's there yet. I think we're going to need to see another year, another 2 years of sustained production from the running back position. And it wouldn't surprise me after that if that's when the Eagles flip the switch and they end up with a new zippy wide receiver that's a rookie and he's Deebo Samuel 2.0 and can do a little bit of everything. And I think that's just the way the Eagles tend to do things. So anyway, that was, again, a long-winded way of saying I agree. And regardless of how that year shakes up, whether it's more running back focused, whether it is more, versatile players coming downhill and blitzing and coming off the edge, then I think that either way, those linebackers are going to be in for a little bit more work than usual, shall we say. Shout out to Dante Costa as well for coming in and dropping the Eagles fight song. That's the sort of energy we need in the middle of June when there's nothing happening. It's all quiet. It's all settled before the storm of the offseason. And Dante, still wrapped up in the Super Bowl, still thinks about it most days like the rest of us, willing to come in and type out the fight song. Love that. What a baller he is. Appreciate you clocking in, my friend. Duck says NFL coaches are slow to change their philosophies. It took them 2 seasons to even slow down the tush push. It took 5 years to defend against the West Coast. Very true. And that's a very good point. And the Eagles just continue to almost front run that and get in front of it and anticipate what the new trend is going to be before it happens. And it's fascinating to watch. Like, I'm amazed that more GMs aren't as aggressive at doing it. I think that the Ravens have always done a good job at that. The Bills have certainly got a lot better. They just seem to mess it up whenever they get to the playoffs. But you're right. And I think because of that, it's just given the Eagles time to prepare. Like, if it all happened over one off season and the defense isn't quite ready to stop a renewed focus on running the rock, for instance, it would hurt them. But I think because of that gradual change, because it doesn't happen as quickly as things like the NBA or as soccer or baseball even, that it allows the Eagles to just go, all right, well, we can draft one guy this year, we can stock capital for next year, and we can pay that guy and just build it slowly and organically. And even if you look back to that draft, when you had Carter and Smith coming out, then all of a sudden you've got a defensive front of 3 Georgia Bulldogs that all play a very certain way, all complement each other a very certain way. And it's just so cool to go from that to then looking at what they do to layer it each offseason. And there's a real process. And it's a joy to watch, honestly. As a nerd that just loves like numbers and I don't know, like value and finding value on things. Like I think it's amazing. Like, I would love to sit down with Howie Roseman for 20 minutes. And you're never going to get much out of him because, you're not going to reveal your secrets and stuff. But just to pick his brain and just understand like where they come from and where the thoughts come and how hard they are to implement. I think he's just a generational guy. And there needs to be a 30 for 30 documentary on just the mind of Howie Roseman. Not even Howie, just the way his mind works. And I will binge watch it, to the day I die. But Anthony Alacorn, I hope I know I didn't pronounce that right. I apologize, Anthony. I rate the profile picture, though. Our secondary is going to look great with Quignon, Coop, Keeley, and Reed, and drafted Andrew McCoober, who's one of his favorite draft picks this year. Fly, Eagles, fly. Love the energy, Anthony. I'm excited about the secondary. I think, look, for me, I've always been a cornerback lover, right? Like, it's been the one position I geek out on every single year. I absolutely love finding just hungry ball players that are rangy and can get balls batted down at the catch point. I love twitchy hips and people that can flip them in a heartbeat. It's just such a satisfying position to watch. And I think it is one of the hardest spots, if not the hardest, in the NFL. Like, it just is. And to go into a year 2 now with Quignon and Cooper after the rookie campaigns they had, to know that Keely Ringo might finally be getting his shot after pounding the table for him. And it sucked when he was drafted because there was very much a glass ceiling where you're not going to start over Bradbury, you're not going to start over Slay, you're not going to start in the nickel because you're not built for that, you're a boundary corner. And you just have to wait your turn and just hope that something opens up. And the fact that it did, and the fact that it has now got to a point where we could be seeing Ringo start on the boundary opposite Quignon and become another Bulldog to, lock into this Eagles defense is super exciting. I love Reed. If I'm honest, Reed really surprised me in 2024. I'll say that. I think for me going into 2024, I know I was on the record of putting him in the same conversation as Quez Watkins. And I don't mean that literally because we all know there's a vast difference in the talent level between what Quez was and what Reed is. But in terms of the Eagles trying to build a championship team and good enough just not being good enough. Like, you need elite, you need great, you need game-changing. And I think Reed Blankenship, to be fair, continued his development in a way that I didn't really forecast. I thought that was kind of his peak as a rotational guy, a starter in spots, and that was sort of it. And they maybe needed that upgrade. But 2024, with the confidence that he had and his activity with turnovers and getting balls batted down, and I think he had like 4 interceptions on the season. And genuinely, I just think it was such a comfort in the defensive backfield. And 2023 was good, okay? But I thought that would be it. Like, there were still some holes in his game, and that was sort of it. And to play the way he did in 2024, I really think he benefited from Cooper being around. Like, obviously, I know they've got the exciting Whites nickname and they've got the podcast now, but there was definitely something special about that young secondary and about Reed, who almost became a de facto leader at times for that DB position. And you're now in a position where he's entering a contract year. If I'm the Eagles, I'm looking to pay him ASAP. I think, like, it's really difficult because if you leave it too long and he balls out again, I think the last thing you want now is Reed to play himself out of a contract with the Eagles. As an Eagles fan, like, you don't want him to have the season of a lifetime and then go and sign a massive contract with a rival or in the AFC or wherever it may be. And it's tough for Howie because he's got a lot of big decisions to make now where, as we said, Carter needs a new deal. Davis potentially after that option year. You're going to need, Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean. Luckily, near enough the entire offense is locked up, right? Jalen's under contract for infinity by the sounds of it. Saquon's not going anywhere. The entire offensive line, with the exception of Tyler Steen, is under contract. Both star receivers under contract. The only other exceptions are Jahan Dotson, which, and Dallas Goedert, who may sign one more year with the Eagles, may want to stay with the team that drafted him. I think that will be a tough goodbye. Genuine question then, on that note, while I ramble away. What goodbye would hurt more at this point, right? When Zach Ertz left the Eagles, or if Dallas Goedert was to leave this offseason and sign a deal with another team, which one would sting more? Because a lot of people would say Zach Ertz because of the fact that he was such a key cog in the offense and was more of a person than a player in a weird sense, if you get what I mean, where he was just bigger than football. Everyone loved Zach Ertz. But I think Dallas Goedert has been someone that has just grown into like a really solid role. He's been such a constant in this offense since he was drafted. He's withstood coaching changes. He's been a part of two remarkable runs now. And I don't know. I just want you, I'm intrigued. What goodbye not that he's gone yet. I don't want to forecast it, but which one would hurt more? See, that's it. Like, Zach Ertz had the fan favorite about him, wasn't he? He was such a gem. I think that it didn't help that Zach Ertz was so emotional leaving Philly. Like, that press conference where he was all teared up, like the shot of him and Kelsey and Wentz kind of all teared up, like, that sucked. Like, it was a really, really hard goodbye. And I think Dallas Goedert's going to hit people harder than we're expecting. I think, like, there was a point last season where we were like, yeah, but he's getting older, but he's, like, struggling with health or like durability, I guess, and like the contract values going up and they need to get a replacement. And we've all been pushing for a TE2 for some time now. But I think when he goes, you're going to miss, like, he should become the glue, especially in the run game, right? Like, for Saquon, for the running backs before, like, bear in mind what he did for guys like, I don't know, Josh Adams or whoever, like, to help mid-rushing or running backs like Miles Sanders become good. Like, I think just as a run blocker, you're going to miss that glue. Like, I think he's going to be one of those players where you don't really miss him till he's gone. And yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. And he did sign a postcard saying PSN season on it. So, he's got a lot of love on my heart. We should actually have an interview with him coming up. I promise that wasn't biased. Oh, that was a totally rogue thought. But I think we've got a piece coming up this week on phillysportsnetwork.com with Dallas Goedert. So Mike Greger, one of our writers, you saw him with the draft shows that we did, has an interview with him. So we'll have that coming up very, very shortly. And Duck says Ertz made AZ and DC better. AZ, DC, good band. Good band. Saw him live. Good band. I'm also more mentally prepared to lose Goddard. That's true. The bigger question is who replaces him next year. Yeah, so I wrote an article about Eagles who could be next in line for a contract. Might have been Friday. And one of the names I put on there was Grant Colcaterra because I think that he is so underrated and no one is valuing him yet. Like, from a fan base perspective, because he just hasn't been in that breakout role, and people look at tight ends and they want to see the big catches. And yes, he got his first touchdown, and I think he had one taken away as well. But I think that the Eagles have been trying for so long to find a tight end that they can groom and develop in the mold of Dallas Goedert, or to have that, nub formation, and just haven't found it. You can look at Tyree Jackson, you can look at Richard Rodgers, you can go back and look at a myriad of names that they've brought in, and they've just done absolutely nothing. And the only one was Grant Calcaterra, who, when he was drafted out of Oklahoma, had a bit of a rapport with Jalen Hurts and has grown and has become at least a viable receiving threat. I think he had like 240 yards receiving off the top of my head in 2024. And that's a start, right? Like, that is a beginning of a player beginning to find his feet in the NFL. And I think if Goddard goes, you're going to need a run blocking tight end. And I know they've got a couple of names on the roster that could be, okay, none of them are great in retrospect. None of them are brilliant. But you've got something to tide you over. And my head, if I'm honest, just got lost saying, so I remembered that Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari were at the edge position, and I just totally forgot to mention them once. But that's fine. Reinforces the point. Blah, blah, blah. They don't need Bryce Huff. So, yeah, I think that Grant Calcaterra, for me, would absolutely be a name you've got to prioritize. Like, because right now you can sign him cheap. Like, you can sign him to probably a 3-year deal worth in total maybe like $9 million. $3 million a year, maybe a few like incentives here and there, maybe a little bit extra guaranteed. I don't know. But you could get a player that can absolutely do a job and continue to grow. And I think what we saw in 2023, where he was predominantly a special teamer, to then end up playing in a huge chunk of offensive snaps and actually get targets and then get the receptions and then go on and do something with them. It's hard. Like, you look at even receivers that do it, where they'll just be true special teamers, and then they'll get a few snaps and they filter in and they get targets, and then they don't catch the ball, or they catch the ball and it goes nowhere, and you end up a bit stuck. To actually prove your worthwhile of more offensive snaps is something that's very, very hard to do. And I think that, to me, Grant Calcaterra did a very, very good job of that in 2024. So that will be one player I think that the Eagles absolutely need to put pen to paper with as soon as possible. The risk is now that if you leave it all season, there's a lot of players that you need to put pen to paper with, and they're all coming at once. And if you can't get the little ones out the way, I think it's all just going to hit you like a wave. And that's a very long off season. I'm sure Harry would lose more than a few hairs from the top of his head, like trying to negotiate these contracts when you've got, again, Carter, Davis potentially, Nolan Smith, potentially Nakobe Dean, Reed Blankenship. As I just mentioned, Grant Calcaterra. There's a couple other names as well. Tyler Steen is another one, where he is now in a position where he will be starting full-time, likely at right guard, and he couldn't win the battle last year. He's now going to be a starter. If he then takes that leap, as every offensive lineman near enough does under Jeff Stoutland, that's a big contract waiting. Like, there's a lot of guys that are going to need money, and someone under the radar like Calcaterra, you can sign cheap now, get that cheap security, and that then ties you over. Even if he doesn't become the guy, if he doesn't become TE1, you've got a tight end that can catch, that can make plays in the open field, that is developing on a cheap deal. Like, to me, that is a no-brainer, given the swarm of contracts that the Eagles are going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future. So I think that's just about caught us up on everything Eagles related. If you guys have any questions at all or stuff you want to go over, please let me know, just so we can kind of round out the rest of the show. I don't want to cut it off too early. I'm not that mean. I've only just come back. So if you've got any Eagles questions, I've tried to cover as many bases as humanly possible, but I've probably inevitably missed something or some rumor or something like that. So, if you're on YouTube, drop it in the comments. Or on X, you can do that as well. You can just leave a reply, and it will pop up on my magical dashboard, and we can talk some more birds. So, I think overall, as I said, just in case you don't, and we're all Eagles out now until Wednesday. On Wednesday, we'll go back to the prospect film room. So we'll do Mac McWilliams. We'll get back into that rhythm. Again, just wanted to apologize for being MIA for like a month. I think it ended up being. It was just non-stop, and I didn't want to just do one stream, then disappear, then one stream, then disappear. I was like, let's just wait till we can get into a rhythm and do it again and be consistent, because I don't want to build you up and break you down, and then you guys are waiting on streams and they're not there. So Yeah, we're back rolling now. Wednesday we'll do some more film rooms on but Mac McWilliams. And yeah, that should be good. But before we go, Birdbrain with a last gasp question, a half-court buzzer beater. Who's someone you're looking forward to see more of at camp? I think Keely Ringo is one of them. I think I'm really intrigued to see what Keely Ringo does with a new opportunity. Like we've seen what he does with the 2s, with the 3s, with the 4s. We've seen him in preseason. We've seen him occasionally on the field in 2023. Let's see what he can do now as a corner in training camp against Devontae Smith over a week. Not just one play. Let's see it over a week. Let's see how he handles AJ Brown. Let's see how he handles Jahan Dotson for that matter. Let's see how he handles Aeneas Smith. Like, let's just get him in those positions. Can he hang with the quicker receivers? And the Eagles have got a real blessing with that because you've got two completely contrasting receivers. Like AJ Brown is basically Optimus Prime and Devontae Smith is like the Flash. Like you've just got two completely different styles of wideouts. And they're going to demand different things out of a cornerback. Like keeping up with Devontae Smith, who can break ankles in a heartbeat, you've got to be at the top of your game with your reading of the game, with the reading of the route, with your positioning, with your ability to flip your hips. With AJ Brown, you can be a little bit less consistent on that front, but you've got to be more physical and you've got to be more physical at the catch point and you can't get knocked off the route. You have to absorb contact and stay in phase down the stem. All of that is so important. And Ringo now has an opportunity to go up against two of the very best in the NFL over a summer. And I'm intrigued to see how that looks. I want to know if he's taken another leap from last offseason to this offseason. And if he can hang, and if he can, I think that's going to be a very fun player to watch as a starter if he wins that role. Outside of that, if I'm honest, it's a boring option. Aeneas Smith, I was so high on him last year. Like I absolutely loved him coming out of college, and it just flopped again in true John Hightower fashion. The difference is he's still on the roster, and there could be an opening long term at slot receiver. I want to see. After we saw a little bit of gas from him, we saw him on the field towards the end of 2024. We saw what he could do. I want to see what he can do now over a full summer without a nagging injury. Can he get up to speed? Can he maybe put a little bit of pressure under the rear of Jahan Dotson and earn himself some offensive snaps? Tyler Steen is another name. As I mentioned, I probably just ruined it by yapping about it a moment ago. But I think that's someone where there's a lot of pressure now, because he couldn't win that starting role against Mekhi Becton last year. He's now been given the reins, essentially. I think the character that he showed and the confidence that he showed in like a pinch scenario in 2024, where all odds were against him and he had to step in and deliver, I think he did well. But now can he do it full time? Can he become the next Jeff Stoutland prodigy to go from someone that wasn't ready in 2023, wasn't ready in 2024, who is then polished, reliable, composed, as you like, at that position for 2025. I think that is a really, really big player to focus on. Outside of that, who am I excited to see? Will Shipley. I want to see more of Will Shipley. I think he's just an exciting young running back to keep an eye on. He's never going to, displace Saquon Barkley, but it's that rotational change of pace back. I think he's got upside, and I just like seeing him work. I think he's a lot of fun to watch. Johnny Wilson is another one. I think that's a receiver that could potentially end. I love these stories every year of a player that maybe could change positions or could help another area. And I think Johnny Wilson is a player that can absolutely maybe just become this like inline slot receiver. That's not necessarily a tight end, not necessarily a slot, but someone that can chip block and move to the second level and make some catches in space. I think he's got a lot of upside. And outside of that, defensively, I think Nolan Smith to see what he can do. Jalick Hunt is probably the main one I would circle as a second-year player that looked really, really good towards the end of 2024. Settled into a role that he was thrust into, as we said earlier on, very nicely. Very much alleviated the pressure of not having Bryce Huff on the field. How does he now rank against someone like Josh Uche, like Azeez Ojulari, that have got probably 12 sacks between them over the past couple of years? Can he now take another step? Can he be an impactful edge rusher? That's another exciting guy to watch. So there's a few. I know you asked for someone, and I gave you about 58, so I apologize for that. But there will be the ones that I'm most excited to keep an eye on when training camp rolls around. Aeneas Smith stinks. Look, I will make a promise now. There will be one receiver between now and about 2050 where I say I'm high on him, and then the Eagles draft him, and then he turns out to be moderately average. And when that day comes, I will be the most insufferable person on the planet. It doesn't even have to be good. He just needs to make one regular season catch, like in week 3, on the field for me to be losing my mind. And I'm excited for that day. Steen is a good guy when he was in there. There are quite a few rookies and undrafted free agents who are physical beasts. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if Steen can then no longer measure up to a couple of the guys that have come in this offseason, you've got to ask questions. It's a big, big year for him. This is a huge year for him now. Because, again, his offensive line has been a very well-oiled machine for a number of years. Mylanta's going nowhere. Dickerson's going nowhere. Jurgens is going nowhere. Johnson's going nowhere. He's the missing link. He's the one guy. He's got to try and find it and get going. Between Hightower and Dawson, your record is sketchy. Look, it is, but let's look at the players that I was also high on that did well occasionally. Boston Scott was very high on Boston Scott as a signing. Cravon LeBlanc, let us not forget, Captain Cravon. Okay, that was an LJ classic. I think it kind of stops there, to be honest. I think that's about as deep as I've gotten. But you can't win them all, can you? There's a reason I'm sat here yapping to you guys and not working for... Oh, yeah, Zach Bourne. How could I forget? I mean, that was kind of an important one, right? That was an OG, LJ, heart, fall in love crush, and that did very well. So we've got that, okay? Maybe that at least makes up for Clayton Dawson. Maybe. We'll see. But on that note, we're going to end it there, guys. Again, I appreciate you all so much for coming back and hanging out and chatting birds. We will be doing a film room again on Wednesday, like I said. And on Tuesday night, you will have Flipping the Birds. There'll be a Sixers stream on Thursday, a Philly stream on Friday. We're gearing it up. It's taken a little while, but we're back rolling again. So, as Doug says, Zach Bourne was my unicorn. Yeah, it's never going to be topped, is it? I think that was a capturing lightning in a bottle moment and just clinging onto it for dear life while it electrocuted me and the whole city of Philadelphia. So, also... we haven't spoken about Terrace Marshall. I will continue that trend, and I will not talk about Terrace Marshall because I was so low on him as a player coming out of college. I didn't see what everyone else saw, and now he's playing for the Eagles, and I'm filled with an incandescent rage because people just tweet me whenever he's mentioned. Like, whenever he does something, whenever there's like a mini camp report, I was getting tagged in it, and I was just sat there like twitching like that. So that's fun. And obviously, I hope he succeeds. Like, I hope he does well. And I hope I was wrong. Like, there's no better thing really with the NFL than being proved wrong about a player because it means they're good and you expect them to be bad, you know? But yeah, wasn't a big fan of him. So I think he's done it on purpose. I think he's just gone back and read receipts from like 2018 and gone, yeah, we can wind up this British kid for no reason. He's got silly hair now. I reckon we can sort him out. So, maybe I tell you what if Bird Brain, we do a Terrace Marshall film room? Well, that's on brand, isn't it? Right? I've been one of his biggest haters since coming out of LSU. What if we do a Terrace Marshall film room at some point in the next couple of weeks? Would that be good entertainment for all the boys and girls at home who are, I'm sure, gagging to see Terrace Marshall run empty routes? If you want to see it, like you line them up, I'll knock them down. You say the word and we'll make that film room happen. So I have that to think about. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a Terrace Marshall film room to see if I was wrong, to see if I can hold my hands up and say, look, this kid's got game. I was a bit premature. I was wrong. And he's grown into a player that I am now, happy to say, sorry, Terrace, I was wrong. We'll do that some point next week. All right. But until then, guys, enjoy the rest of your Monday evening. Thank you once again for hanging out. On your way out of the theatre, if you could leave a like, that would be absolutely sensational. Burrow merchant. But yeah, take care of yourselves. We'll see you on Wednesday where we'll do it all over again. Go Birds. I'll see you soon.